Finding the right keyboard is always difficult. It's a balancing act between finding the right keyboard for your budget, finding the features that you want, and the build quality of the board too. This keyboard fits 2 out of 3 boxes perfectly, but it's missing the other one. Can you guess which one it's missing? Comment down below and we'll jump into that review. Hey guys, this is Betty from Switch and Click, and here we focus on providing thorough, detailed, and honest reviews and information so that you can make purchasing decisions without any regrets at all. And in this video, we've got the Ajazz K870T. Let's jump into what's in the box. All right, in the box, of course, you're going to get your keyboard itself, and then you also get a white braided USB-C cable. It's pretty durable except for the plastic ends, which do have a bit of a problem fitting into the USB-C port, and you'll see that soon enough. As for the length, it's a little bit longer than 5 feet or 1.6 meters if you're interested. We also have some additional colored keycaps that reminds me of an off-brand Google, and it also reminds me of Ducky or the N Pro 2 in the way that they give you additional colored keycaps. And from what I've seen, people really love this stuff. I've already put it onto my keyboard, but it looks a lot better with the colors, I gotta say. And then you also get a white plastic keycap puller. It's not the highest quality and it probably will scratch your keycaps, so be careful about that. Get a wired keycap puller if you want to protect your keycaps. And that's pretty much for all that's in the box. Move on to build quality. As for build quality, the plastic feels pretty sturdy and it's got minimal flex when you do try to bend your board, but there will be a little bit of creaking. There's a very slight incline from your side, and as you can see, it doesn't have the floating keycap design, but the keycaps aren't exactly inside your case either. It's just very slightly above it. On the back, you can see that there's 2 rubber feet with 1 incline angle each, and you can use these if you think the angle isn't good enough for you already. It does have 4 rubber feet, so you're not going to slide anywhere, but if you are using these inclined feet, then make sure you don't lose them because they're not exactly glued very tightly onto your legs. On the back, you're also going to see this small tiny on-off button, and that's because this keyboard does have a battery because it does have Bluetooth. On the front of the board here on the right, you do see that it has Ajazz branding, and it's pretty subtle, not super outlandishly big or bright or bold. On the very back here, we've got our power port in the left third of the board, and it is pretty recessed in there. It doesn't look super clean or planned, and when you do put in the attached cable, there will be a little bit of interference with the plastic heads that we spoke of earlier, but if you just apply more pressure, get that in there, it will fit. However, the fact that the board's recessed port doesn't fit that well with the cable it comes with, it doesn't really shout confidence. If you're into custom coiled cables or any custom cables, you're gonna have a little bit of trouble, so be sure those ends are heat shrinked and as small as they could possibly be. On the top left here, you do see a few indicators. There's 2 of them. One is for caps lock and the other is for battery. As for the layout, this is a 10 keyless or a TKL keyboard. That means it's just like a full-size board, except you slash off that number pad and extra keys on top. But it does have all of the function you could possibly need if you're doing work. So it's got 87 keys, and it does have a dedicated scroll wheel for your volume as well. I've seen this getting pretty popular lately, and I gotta say, I'm a big fan of it. Volume wheels are a big bonus, especially if you're doing something else but you want to turn down the volume really quickly. This can be a really easy way to do it. It doesn't have dedicated media keys, but it does have them on the secondary function on the function row, so they're pretty easy to access. The scroll wheel is placed between your arrow keys and your nav cluster. It's horizontal and scrolls up and down vertically, so it's not super satisfying. I much prefer the knob kind of tactile wheel instead. I don't know what you guys think, but I think knob is better than this kind of scrolling. The wheel itself is very tactile and it has pretty minimal resistance, but it does make quite a bit of sound, as you can hear right now. Right next to that scroll wheel, you've got 2 buttons. One is for going in between Bluetooth mode and wired mode, and the other button is for changing the function of your scroll wheel One is to change the brightness of the backlighting of the keycaps, and then the other is what we did before, is changing up and down the volume of your music, sound, whatever it may be. As for keycaps, these are ABS double shot keycaps, and their legends are disconnected. So it's not exactly modern looking or sleek or stylish, but it gets the job done. The secondary legends are pretty easy to see, and if you're using any of those media keys, you won't have a hard time using them because you're not going to need to memorize them. After a few typing sessions, several hours long, the keycaps themselves aren't too shiny, but after several months, ABS keycaps are pretty prone to shine over time. And these colored keycaps are PBT with laser etched legends, so they don't really have shine through. And this can cause a little bit of awkwardness because you have most of your letters with RGB shine through, and then you have some of your modifiers here that don't have it. It's fairly noticeable. Despite the differences, the additional colored keycaps were a really good idea. Maybe they just weren't as properly executed. Because this is a TKL, it does have a standard bottom row. Everything about this is pretty standard, so if you do buy some additional custom keycaps farther down the line, you can definitely fit it onto this board, no issues at all. The keycaps of this board are probably the most disappointing part of it, and while this board isn't exactly high end, it's $70, and that's not exactly on the budget side either. At this point, we're expecting a little bit more. As for switches, this keyboard uses Huano switches. It's actually the first time that I've seen switches of that brand. I think they also make switches for mice, so it's pretty interesting to see them get into the keyboard space, although it's pretty rare. Pretty much nothing can be found about these switches, so we're just out of luck here. Our Ajazz K870T came with Huano black switches, which are linears and in the intermediate spring force range. They feel similar to Gateron yellows. These switches feel pretty scratchy, wobbly, and inconsistent from switch to switch. So it's not doing very well so far, is it? They do have cross-shaped stems, so you are free to change your keycaps out to whatever. There's 4 other switch options that you can pick from, and that is red, blue, brown, and black. To be honest, they really don't feel that bad compared to all the other switches such as Kel and Gateron, but because there's so little information out there, I gotta say, it's just a little bit sketch. Just a little bit. This board is not hot swappable, so you're not going to be able to change out your switches unless you have a desoldering gun and a soldering iron. Anyways, let's jump into those stabilizers. So these are pretty much normal plate mounted stabilizers, nothing too special here. They come with a black stem and a black housing and the usual silver wire, so nothing too special at all. One thing to note is that they are not factory lubed. They feel pretty good without a ton of rattle. The spacebar makes a nice thunk sound, and doing mods on them is going to be pretty difficult since they are soldered in. While you're typing though, most of this rattle can't really be heard, and it's not too much of a bother either. We'll cut to that sound test right now. Alright, that was a sound test with the Huano black switches. As for RGB, it does have 18 preset lighting effects on this board, and they're super easy to access. You just hold FN and then any one of these nav cluster keys. Each one has 3 effects programmed into them, and you just press them again and again to cycle through the 3. 6 times 3 is 18, so 18 effects. You also have per key RGB lighting that can be programmed through the board's firmware. It just takes a little bit to learn and get used to, and you can learn all of that in the manual, as well as checking out our website in the link down below, where you can see everything that we're talking about here at a glance in a really easily digestible manner. Check that out at switchandclick.com. As for software, there is software, but most of the function on this board can be done through its firmware. Honestly, after last month's incident with the whole software thing, I'm so anti-downloading software right now that I appreciate a board with strong firmware, and I don't like downloading anything. But I'm saying there is software, but download it at your own risk. As for the software, even if you do download it, you do need to keep it open at all times to get the effects that you want. So there's not much of a benefit there anyways. For RGB, there are 3 different layers that you can edit with your per key editing system on the firmware, and you do that by changing between FN and 1, 2, or 3. You can change the brightness as well as the effect speeds using FN and your arrow keys. And you've got a bunch of secondary functions on your function row that pretty much match the secondary functions on a Mac. So if you're used to boards such as Keychron or some Apple Maker boards, you'll be pretty used to this function row. You can do things such as go up and down in screen brightness, open your calculator, internet, Windows, all those things. Unfortunately, there's no key remapping and there's no macros. As for Bluetooth, it does have Bluetooth 3.0 and it's a little bit outdated, and I highly don't recommend that you try any gaming or even speed typing on this board. It can connect up to 3 devices, and you can pair to those by pressing FN and Q, W, or E. The pairing mode is a little bit more complicated than what it is on other boards, and we'll talk about that right now. So to pair Bluetooth, you want to make sure the keyboard is on first by sliding that toggle button on the very back. Then on the front, you want to press the button right next to the volume wheel and make sure that that's on so that you know that Bluetooth is turned on rather than wired mode. Then you're going to press FN and either Q, W, or E depending on what place you want to connect it to. And then you hold FN and P for pairing. So it's a lot of steps. It's a little bit more complicated than it should be. I'm not sure why they did that, but at least it pairs to your board, right? The battery is 2000 milliampere hours, and with RGB it can last up to 8 hours, and without RGB up to 100 hours. So what's the verdict on this board? In the beginning, we talked about 3 different things to look for: budget, features, and quality. I would say this fits the budget category since it's $70, and it also has a ton of features that are just packed into this board, like Bluetooth, Mac compatibility, RGB, per key lighting, volume scroll wheel, all that stuff. But it's a little bit lacking on the quality with what we've seen with the keycaps, the switches, and even just normal stock stabilizers with nothing too special. Ajazz was pretty ambitious with this board, and you gotta give them props for doing that. They tried to add a lot of things into one board, but this is one of those boards where it's a jack of all trades, but it's a master of none. If you care solely about the features of a keyboard and see how many features it could actually have for you to list out, then this is a pretty good board to consider. But if you're looking for a long-lasting, high-quality board that you know is going to last you many years to come, then there's a lot of other options out there as well. All in all, for the price, it has a lot of stuff going on for it, but also for the price, there's other options out there too. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful and helped you decide whether you wanted to buy this board or not. If you want to support us at Switch and Click, be sure to check out our Patreon page where you can look at the different tiers and see what exclusive content you can access, such as a patrons only Discord channel, behind the scenes content, live streams, and much more. Check that out at our Patreon page. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!